You are holding an egg. It looks completely ordinary. You have seen eggs your entire life. You have eaten them for breakfast, cracked them into bowls, bought them by the dozen without a second thought. But right now, inside billions of eggs just like this one, something is happening that most people never think about. And when you find out what it is, you will never look at a carton of eggs the same way again, because the egg industry is hiding something in plain sight. Not out of malice, not out of secrecy, but because of a biological problem so fundamental, so baked into the nature of chickens themselves, that the entire global food system built itself around it without ever really solving it. Most people assume that male chickens just end up as the chicken on your plate. That seems logical, right? A male chick hatches. It grows up. You eat it. Simple. But that is not what happens, not even close. And the real answer involves a number so staggering that when scientists first calculated it, it sparked one of the largest ethical debates in modern food production. Stay till the end of this video, because the last part reveals what is actually being done about this right now, and one of those solutions might fundamentally change what food even means in your lifetime. Let's start at the very beginning. You want a chicken that lays eggs. What kind of chicken do you pick? You do not just grab any random bird. The poultry industry has spent over a century of selective breeding to create something almost unnatural. A bird so specialized, so laser-focused on one single job, that it has essentially become a living egg machine. The most famous of these breeds is called the Leghorn. Imagine a small, wiry, almost frantic little bird. It barely looks like the plump chicken you picture in your head. It is lean, almost bony. It has almost no muscle mass to speak of. And that is completely intentional. Every calorie this bird consumes goes into one place: egg production. At its peak, a single Leghorn hen can lay around 300 eggs in a single year. Think about that for a moment. 300 eggs from one bird in 12 months. That is almost one egg every single day of the year. Now imagine the other kind of chicken, the kind bred not for eggs but for meat. The most common is called the Cornish cross, and it is almost the exact biological opposite of the Leghorn. Where the Leghorn is small and efficient, the Cornish cross is massive and fast-growing. It puts on muscle at a rate that seems almost science fiction. A Cornish cross chick hatches, and within 6 weeks it has grown so large it is ready to be slaughtered. 6 weeks. It can reach twice the body mass of an egg breed male in that same window of time. These two birds are so different from each other they might as well be different species. And this is where the problem begins, because these two industries, the egg industry and the meat industry, are completely separate systems. They do not overlap. They do not share birds. They each use totally different breeds for totally different purposes. And the moment you understand that, a very uncomfortable question surfaces. What happens to the males? Here's the thing about biology. You cannot hatch only female chicks. It does not work that way. Every hatchery, every single time, produces a 50-50 split. Roughly half male, roughly half female. That is just how genetics works. And for the egg industry, that 50-50 split is a disaster. Think about it from a purely cold economic perspective. You are running an egg farm. You need hens. Only hens can lay eggs. A male Leghorn chick hatches in your facility. What do you do with it? Can it lay eggs? No. Can you raise it for meat? This is where people make the wrong assumption, because the obvious answer seems like yes, just raise them for meat, right? But here is why that does not work. Remember what we said about the Leghorn. It is bred to be small. It is bred to be lean. It grows slowly. It converts its calories into eggs, not muscle. A male Leghorn raised for meat would take far longer to reach any kind of usable size. It would eat enormous amounts of feed. And at the end of all that waiting, all that feeding, what you get is a skinny, stringy, barely there bird that would cost more to produce than you could ever sell it for. The math simply does not work. The cost of keeping that bird alive exceeds the value of the meat on its bones. So you are left with a chick that cannot lay eggs, cannot profitably be raised for meat, and costs money every single day it is alive. From a pure business standpoint, the conclusion is brutal, and this is where the number comes in, the number that changes how you see this whole system. Roughly 7 billion male chicks are culled within 24 hours of hatching every single year. 7 billion. In 1 year, these are chicks that hatched that morning, that are still damp from the shell, that have existed in the open air for less than a day, and they are removed because there is nowhere for them to go. Now pause on that number for a second. 7 billion per year. That is almost one male chick for every single human being alive on Earth today. That is how large the egg industry is. That is how fundamental this problem is. And for years, the global food industry essentially kept this fact at the very back of its mind. Not hidden exactly, but not loudly discussed either. It is one of those things that exists in plain sight, but that almost nobody thinks about when they crack open their morning egg. But here is what is fascinating. This culling is not some fringe practice happening in a few bad factories. It is the global standard. It happens in every country with a modern egg industry, it happens at industrial scale, and it happens because of a biological mismatch that was never solved. It was simply accepted. So now we have to ask the obvious follow-up question: what are we actually eating? When you order chicken at a restaurant, when you buy chicken breasts at the supermarket, where did that bird come from? This is the part that surprises most people. That chicken was almost certainly not a leghorn, and it was almost certainly not the kind of male chick we have been talking about. Remember the two separate systems. The egg industry uses leghorns. The meat industry uses Cornish cross broilers. And on a broiler farm, both males and females are raised together. Both sexes grow to the same enormous size at roughly the same rate. Both are worth exactly the same to the farmer. Both end up on your plate. So male chickens are absolutely being eaten. The chicken you had for dinner last night was probably a male or female Cornish cross. The problem is not that males are never eaten. The problem is that egg breed males, leghorn males specifically, exist in a world where they have no place. The meat industry does not want them because they grow wrong. The egg industry does not want them because they cannot lay. They were bred into an impossible position, and that position costs them their lives within hours of being born. Now here's the part of the story that almost nobody tells you. The part that has been quietly unfolding over the last decade in research labs and agricultural universities and biotech startups around the world. Because scientists and governments and food companies have not simply accepted this situation forever. There are 3 different technologies racing to eliminate this problem entirely, and each one of them is stranger and more radical than the last. The first is called in-ovo sexing. In-ovo means inside the egg. The idea is this: before a chick ever hatches, before it is even fully developed, you identify its sex while it is still inside the shell. If it is male, the egg is removed. If it is female, incubation continues. No chick ever has to hatch only to be immediately culled. The detection happens earlier, at a stage when the embryo has not yet developed to a point of sentience. Germany became the first country in the world to legally mandate this approach. In 2022, Germany banned the culling of day-old chicks and required hatcheries to shift to in-ovo sexing technology instead. It is an extraordinary policy change, and it is forcing the entire German egg industry to adopt technology that, a decade ago, barely existed outside of a lab. But in-ovo sexing has a catch. It is expensive, it requires sophisticated laser and spectroscopy equipment, it requires trained technicians. It is not something a small farm can simply plug in overnight. So for most of the world, it remains out of reach, which is why the second approach is so interesting. Dual-purpose breeds. The concept sounds obvious once you hear it. What if you bred a chicken that was good enough at both? Not a specialist. Not a leghorn optimized purely for eggs. Not a Cornish cross optimized purely for muscle. But a bird that lays a reasonable number of eggs, and whose males grow to a reasonable size for meat. These birds already exist. They are called dual-purpose breeds, and they were actually the standard before industrial farming split everything into hyper-specialized systems. Old-fashioned farm chickens, the kind your great-grandparents kept, were mostly dual-purpose. The hens laid eggs, the roosters and surplus males were eaten. Nothing was wasted. Industrial farming abandoned that model in the pursuit of maximum efficiency. Leghorns lay more eggs than any dual-purpose bird. Cornish cross grow faster than any dual-purpose bird. Specialization wins on output, but it creates the male chick problem. Some farmers and researchers are now arguing that going back to dual-purpose breeds, accepting slightly lower egg output and slightly slower meat growth, is worth it to eliminate the ethical catastrophe of 7 billion culled chicks per year. The trade-off is real. You produce fewer eggs per hen. Your meat birds grow slower and cost more to raise, but you eliminate the dead end. Every chick that hatches has somewhere to go. It is a trade between pure efficiency and something harder to quantify, which brings us to the third approach. And this one sounds like science fiction. Cultured meat. The idea of growing animal tissue in a laboratory without ever raising an animal has existed as a theoretical concept for decades. But in the last 10 years, it has moved from theory to actual edible product. Singapore became the first country in the world to approve the sale of lab-grown chicken meat. Companies like Upside Foods in the United States have received regulatory clearance to sell chicken grown from real chicken cells, without slaughtering a single bird. The process works like this. You take a small sample of cells from a living chicken. You put those cells in a nutrient-rich environment. Those cells multiply, they grow into muscle tissue. They become something that is, at a biological level, real chicken meat. No farm, no hatchery, no male chick problem, no culling of any kind. The egg question, the gender question, the whole binary that the poultry industry has spent a century struggling with, simply disappears. If it sounds too clean, too simple, that is because we are still in the early stages. Lab-grown meat is currently expensive to produce. It is not yet widely available. Consumer acceptance is still uncertain. But the technology is real, it is advancing, and the speed at which it is advancing is faster than almost any other food technology in history. Now zoom out for a moment, because there is something bigger here than chickens. When you hold a carton of eggs in the supermarket, you are holding the result of an economic system that has been optimizing itself for maximum efficiency for over 100 years. That system produces extraordinary amounts of food at extraordinary low prices. It feeds billions of people. But in its pursuit of efficiency, it created a problem, a biological mismatch between what the system needs and what life produces. And that mismatch has a cost. 7 billion lives per year. That is not a small number. That is not a rounding error. That is the scale of the invisible tax that the current system quietly pays every year to function. You never see it. The industry has never advertised it. But it is happening every year at an almost unimaginable scale. And here is what is quietly extraordinary. You eating breakfast this morning were part of that system. Not because you are bad, not because you chose this, but because you were never really given the full picture. The egg carton does not say what happened to the males. The chicken package does not tell you which breed it came from. The system is designed to deliver food to your plate, not to explain the decisions it made to get it there, but you know now. And knowing changes something. Not necessarily what you do, but how you see the world you are eating in. Because the next time you crack an egg, there is a fuller story behind it. A story of biology and economics and ethics and technology all colliding. A story that humans are, right now, in real time, trying to find a better ending for. And the strange truth is this. The same force that created the problem, the relentless human drive to optimize, to specialize, to make things more efficient, might be the exact same force that eventually solves it. In-ovo sexing, dual-purpose breeds, cultured meat. All of them are attempts to build a system that wastes less. That sees the full picture. That acknowledges what the carton of eggs has never told you. We are what we eat, but we are also the questions we never thought to ask. And now you have asked one.